Yes, guys, we are here. Sorry for the delay for those who have been waiting, but now we are here. Welcome back to When Two or More with the McCaws. Today, unfortunately, I'm on my own, but it's a blessing to still be here, to still be communicating what we are today. I'm really excited because the subject that we're talking about today is adoption. And so I've got a very special guest for today, which I hope you're excited about, because I am. And if nobody watches this, I'm here. I'm listening, and I've heard the person I'm about to interview's story previously, but I'm really excited. 7 years since I last heard this story. I'm excited to hear it again, and I hope you are too. Just before we get into it, there's ways you can support this podcast, which would be fantastic. I'm going to put a link down below. Nanny and I have got a process in which we call, it's basically a buy a coffee process. You may have seen it before. It's just a way in which that you can financially support the work of the podcast, if that's something you would like to consider. If not, there's obviously no obligation to do that. But what we would like is that as many people get to hear this message that Rush is bringing us to today. So what you can do to help that is by rating this podcast on the platform that you are listening to it on. So whether that's Apple Podcasts, hit the stars, YouTube, subscribe, put a thumbs up if you're watching. That would be absolutely fantastic if you could do that. That just makes sure that we get this message out to people, especially now in today's society. Podcasts, YouTube, it's full of a lot of stuff that doesn't give us life. I heavily wholeheartedly believe that the message that we're going to hear today is going to give life. And it's really going to inspire some of you listening, inspire some of you watching, going to give you some great ideas, but also to open up, maybe broaden your landscapes when it comes to broaden your horizons, when it comes to the idea of adoption, even if you've never considered it before. I'm hoping that we will really be engaged today by what Rush has got to bring. He's got a fantastic story. I'm really excited to hear it. So let's bring in Rush. Rush, how you doing, mate? You okay?
Hey, brother. Yeah, I'm doing great. Good to see you, Stuart.
Yeah, again. Great to see you. I know. That's awesome. So when I mentioned to a few people that this is what we were going to do, people said to me, so how do you know? So effectively, Rush, I want you just to, how do you know each other? That was the question I got. Rush, I want you to explain how you and I know each other.
So, yeah, I guess it's been like 7 or 8 years ago. Yeah. My local church here in Richmond, Virginia, went on a missions trip to Bolivia and partnered with W2OM. And I'm still not 100% if I can remember your connection to what you were doing exactly with W2OM or how we got mixed up there together. But we both ended up in Bolivia at the same time, working together on a missions project. And the project itself is crazy. It's a crazy story itself, what we did while we were there. But we were also working with vulnerable kids, kids that were living in poverty and really difficult life. And but you and I just hit it off immediately, brother. I mean, it was like a couple of long lost brothers from across the ocean. So absolutely. We had a good time there together. Yeah,
absolutely. No, that's fantastic. We did have, I think, how long were you there for as a church? Was it a week or was it 2 weeks?
It was just a week. Yeah, we were there for just a week. You were there much longer, I think, than us. So.
Yeah, we were in Bolivia for 2 weeks, I think. But it was part of the longer trip that we had, just the outreach when it came to DTS. But it worked nicely and it went really well. And as you just touched around, like we got on, didn't we? Really, really well.
Yeah.
Had a great time, and we might as well talk about that now. Like, what was it? Share the task. So we went to Bolivia. We were in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. We were working with an organization called Operation Restoration.
Yep.
And their kind of goal is to bring people off the street and be able to provide a place for them to stay, get education, really the upbringing that they would have. Otherwise, they're kind of destined for a life of being out on the streets and growing up that way and getting into some pretty nasty business. So really, Operation Restoration gives them a hope. We were given this strange task to do in this house. Rush, tell us about what we did.
Yeah, so obviously Operation Restoration is definitely worth checking out. Fabulous organization, just a pleasure to work with. But yeah, we had, I never would have expected when we went to our first little briefing before Stuart and I went to our assigned task. I never would have guessed this on a missions field, but we were tasked with basically destroying an in-ground pool that existed on one of their properties and filling that in-ground pool with rock and stone. And basically they wanted to convert it to a patio. So we went to one of the most impoverished nations in South America and destroyed a pool and converted that thing into a. It sounds horrible.
It sounds terrible, doesn't it?
And it was like it was a bunch of like close to like I would say college age boys living in this home, who had access to a swimming pool. Yes. But we did what they asked us to do. They wanted to convert it to a patio, and I've seen pictures of it since. So it looks like they're using it well, but I guess the pool was too much maintenance or something. But it did feel odd to destroy this one item, one item of luxury we saw. we destroyed it.
Yeah, and it was a difficult task as well, wasn't it?
It was, yes. Like, yes. We had like sledgehammers and it was not fun.
Because it's not like you picture a pool being level with the patio, don't you? But it came up, didn't it? It came up by a good couple of inches. Like it had this wall that came around it.
And if you remember, Stuart, we started off, it was okay. Like the first few sledgehammer, we were okay, and then we hit the rebar. You remember, and like it was a mess.
It throughout it, didn't it?
Yeah, it was a mess. So it was good. We laughed a lot, but that was just to get through the experience of trying to break that concrete. Yeah.
Emotionally, I don't know if I've recovered yet, but no, that was a quality experience. But it was a combination mix. I know that I was on DTS at the time with YWAM, and that was part of my outreach. So obviously the YWAM base have links with the West Assembly of God, your church, and so that must have linked alongside. But it worked really well, didn't it? Yeah. Like it was a shorter-term mission for you guys, slightly longer for us. But it was I was out of all. I was in Brazil doing building work. You know, you can see how building work would benefit them. What else did we do? We did, we were in Richmond doing like ministry basketball along the kids of Church Hill, I think it is. Mm-hmm. You know, some fantastic work that was going on there, giving, but then to go to Bolivia and to be taken away.
Yes, but they were thrilled. I know. I know that Operation Restoration, they got what they wanted, and I think that the patio has been more beneficial to their ministry than that beautiful swimming pool was. But the longer term gain is just
no doubt provide them more space, wasn't it? In the long run. Brilliant. So, Rush, will you just share how let's start with first how you became a Christian? Let's walk along that path with you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a really unique story in that. I'm very a long history in terms of my family. So you mentioned my church here in Richmond, Virginia, Weston Assembly of God. They've been around now for like 54 years, I think. And my mother was one of the founding members of that church, along with my maternal grandmother and my paternal grandparents were also all part of this church when it first started, meeting in a hotel room here in Richmond, Virginia. So I've been a part of that legacy kind of from the beginning. So I grew up in the church and I've been in the same church my entire life. So I have a kind of a long-standing history with that. Was involved in a lot of the kids programs and had a lot of great leaders and mentors through my upbringing that just provided a strong, Christian foundation that I've been able to carry through.
Yeah, excellent. And was there a time that you kind of walked away from your faith, or do you think you've got a very
I think I think it's unusual for people to not have ups and downs, whether that's relationships, whether that's their relationship with here on earth or with God. I think that as you go through different phases of life, maybe you drift away or come back. I've never walked away from the faith or anything like that, but I think there's obviously been I'm 43 now, so I've had times in my life where probably I haven't been as close to the Lord as I would have wanted or what He would have wanted. But I think the foundation that was laid and my family that I'm around has always helped keep me grounded in terms of just keeping keeping God and my relationship with Jesus at the center of what we're trying to do. We're not perfect at that. Nobody is. I mean, I think every Christian, if they're being honest about it, there's just struggles in life, and so it's easy to just to fall into the ways of the world and get discouraged. But I feel like I've been incredibly blessed by a lot of things, and having a good support network, having a strong sense of people who've taken the steps before me to kind of lay the groundwork for me, that have kept me grounded in my faith and kept me close to God.
That's fantastic. No, that's absolutely brilliant. So let's talk about family life then, because I think, when I kind of when I thought about people to bring on, people that were real examples of living out their faith in their day to day, you were genuinely one of the first people I thought about.
Thank you.
And I mean that because I think when you think about a podcast, you always think about somebody with a platform that's got the kind of viewership, that's got this. But actually, I see so many people that kind of go under the radar. They do the behind the scenes work. And actually, if you take that kind of analogy of a show or a performance, we always do focus on the person that's on the stage, and we don't realize that actually this doesn't happen without the people behind the show that puts this on. And so I've always had a kind of a heart, really, to try and recognize those people that work as hard, if not harder, than the people around the clock doing this. And so we'll come to learn why, and I'm sure many people will understand very quickly why. But hearing your story, first off, I just gained, 7 years ago, I gained such a respect for what you were doing. And I was like, wow, because a lot of people, we put them on a pedestal for the smallest reasons, right? And so from my point of view, people like you are people like that I really kind of respect, value, want to learn a lot from. You're a huge example for me in what you've done in your life. And so we're going to now hear about, I want to kind of, just first take the moment just to honor you, Rush, because you've blessed me. And to think about, I heard a story from a week with you, really.
Right.
And obviously we met a few times when I was back in Richmond, but that week meant that 7 years ago, that's the kind of the legacy you left with me. And I want to I want people to know that. I want you to feel that you're making a difference in your life, to you're part of my testimony and to my life, and really inspired me in this area. And that's the reason I've got you on, Rush. I don't want to hide away from that. And so I think your story can really show other people and be an example to other people. And when I think about kind of adoption, when I think about people that have got a heart for doing something, and have not just gone, well, I've got a passion for doing this and stuck at it for a couple of years, but have followed it through, that is a part of who they are. I can't think of anyone better, Rush. So
thank you, man. Man, I really appreciate that, Stuart. It means a lot. Thank you, brother. Yeah. Thank you.
Fantastic. Run us through your kind of family life, up to this big moment that we're talking about today. Run us through where you got to there.
Yeah. So my wife and I got married a long time ago now. It still is hard for me to believe. We graduated from college, went to college together, same school here in Virginia, in the U.S., and then got married right out of college. Basically, we finished school and got married right thereafter, back in 2001, and just started our family. And at the time, we were just chugging along. I would say we were very. She came from a Christian home too, strong Christian background, and grew up in the church. So that was always part of our story and what our plans were for our hopes to eventually have a family. And as we started to kind of go through those first steps of being married and getting an apartment and getting settled in jobs, and my wife was pursuing an advanced degree in nursing. So we were just kind of going through life, and really things were going well. We had 2 biological kids within the first several years of us being married. My wife got pregnant. We had a son, and a few years later we had a daughter. And so life was good. They were both healthy, beautiful kids, a boy and a girl. I would say that kind of like the American dream situation. It was just, we had great, healthy kids. We had a nice little home that we had bought, our first home, and we're really just chugging along in the Christian American system. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
you know, and so it wasn't that we were like, had some, you know, had an idea that, our faith wasn't real or anything, but it just was just, we were just going through like the motions we'd always had gone through, and got very comfortable in our life and with the family that we had. And everything was going great. We had no real complaints. And at the time, I mean, as my wife and I dated and started having children, we never really had like conversations about having a big family. We'll get to that eventually. How my family is bigger than it was a few years ago. But you know, we were, I think in my mind, at least, I won't speak for my wife right now, but like, I think in my mind, I mean, I thought 2 kids, that's what we would have. We'd have 2 kids and have a nice, successful life, have a beautiful house, and go on vacations, and retire fat and happy, and go to church, you know, and kind of live out that American dream, with a little bit of Christianity sprinkled in, you know.
Of course. No, that's really interesting. How often do you see that? Do you think, like, people get married, have kids, 1 or 2 kids, and sit back and kind of take that kind of, how often do you see that, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's normal, right? I mean, I think that's kind of like, you know, it's, even if you have a heart for trying to do hard things, you know, comfort is just, there's nothing wrong with comfort either. Like, I mean, it's okay to be comfortable. It's okay to enjoy life and enjoy experiences and enjoy things with your wife or your kids and go on trips. I think all that stuff is great, and it shouldn't, we shouldn't discourage people from doing those things. But I do think it is easy to just kind of get into that routine of like, man, I really would like to do X, but if I did that, it's going to be a lot harder to kind of get, I gotta finish making these car payments, or, you know, we've blown up the credit card shopping, you know, and we can't really take that leap of faith to do anything because we're kind of locked into this system that we've got established into. And I think I think it's normal. I think that's what I mean, I can speak for the American church. I mean, the cultural Christianity, the American church really struggles with consumerism, and just getting, you know, to the point, like, it's all about, you know, me. Even when it comes to like our Christianity, we can just kind of like, look, it's all about me getting fed. I want to be fed. What is this church doing for me? What is this ministry giving to me? And I think it's hard not to stay there, to fall into that kind of way of thinking. It's just, I think it's the natural human response.
Yeah, that's interesting. What would you say to somebody that feels like that, they could easily drop into that, but also wants to serve God passionately with their life? What would you advise, or how would you, because you've gone through this, you've been at that point where you've gone, you know, obviously we're going to go into this, but we've been at a point where you could have sat there and stayed there, and basically that American dream could have just got bigger and better for you,
right?
But you didn't. So something, a calling, or, I know, so what would you advise to somebody, or what?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would say is just get yourself around people that are taking risk for the kingdom of God. Get yourself around people that have a different way of thinking, because I think if you're just around people that are just in that consumerism, comfortable Christianity mindset, it's going to be much easier just to be like, look, everybody is doing that. But if you, and I'm not saying like you got to like go, you know, start begging to hang out with people who are doing, you know, just radical things, but just start, even if it just starts with like reading some books by people who maybe are pushing the limits of their faith, taking steps, and just getting exposed to some things that other people may be doing. And that can even be like listening to a podcast, you know what I mean? Like finding out like what's happening. I mean, our call to get involved in adoption and expand our family wasn't like, I mean, I wasn't like walking down the Damascus Road, you know, and this light came upon me and said, hey, you shall adopt or care about vulnerable kids. It really came from a really basic, simple relationship, primarily that my wife had with a coworker. And that coworker that she worked with, who's a Christian, had adopted, and it sparked something in both of us individually. And that's what led to this. So it wasn't we can overcomplicate it. You know what I mean? We can make it feel like we have to wait for God to do something just that's going to be so clear. There's no question, you know, like a light shining from heaven on us. Like, it doesn't have to be that. It can be really small, I think, interpersonal interactions with people.
Mm-hmm. And so how long did that process go on for, that you were maybe swaying with that kind of decision?
Yeah, I mean, so like I said, this woman who my wife worked with was really kind of the person that I'd first ever been around anyone personally who I known who had adopted, specifically internationally as well. This family had adopted from China, and so I think it took a while. I mean, it was you know, bubbling in our heads for a couple of years before we really were actually taking like real action steps. And it wasn't and my wife and I didn't like sit down immediately once we met this little girl who they had adopted and said, look, we got to do this, man. We really didn't talk about it with each other at first. Like, it was kind of like, I think we both were almost nervous about bringing it up because we did have kind of like, wait, we got 2 healthy kids. Like, what is this? Like, is this really something we would really want to do? And yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, I want to explore that because there's going to be so many people. I did a poll earlier actually on my Instagram, and I put, you know, would you adopt? Basically, I asked the question, which I think is an interesting question. Would you adopt? 88% of people said yes. 12% obviously said no. And then the second question: would you adopt knowing you could have your own kids? That's a different kind of perspective, isn't it? Again, 85% yes, 15% no. And if you did respond on that, I really appreciate your honesty either way. When you've got all this kind of, it's so interesting from your perspective because you've got, as you say, you've got 2 healthy kids. You've got everything on paper that we've been told we should get. And then how do we battle with that kind of selfishness to go forward and broaden the household?
Yeah. You know, again, Stuart, I don't know if there's like a simple, you know, 1, 2, 3 step that I can give you to get there. I think it is, again, being patient with yourself, being patient with God to like wait for the right moments for, when these seeds get planted in you, to give them light and water, you know what I mean? To continue to expose yourself to the things that can help that seed grow through scripture, through relationships, through conversations. But what, you know, we really didn't, you know, my wife and I didn't really sit down and have like this deep conversation about it before I can tell you the story of like exactly how my wife and I kind of got to the point where we started actually taking action steps. Is we were painting our dining room in our old house. So this is no dramatic event. We were painting our dining room, and this has been just in like kind of eating at me for a while. Like, man, I really kind of am feeling like maybe we should pursue adoption. And so I just randomly said to my wife, her name is Jennifer, I said, you know, Jen, like, how would you feel about adopting? And her response was, she was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you're saying this. I've been thinking this, but I was so nervous or worried about bringing it up because I just thought for sure you would just be like, no, I'm not interested in that. We got 2 healthy kids. And so God was working on us individually. Wow. And I think that's another important thing is just like knowing if you do have a partner and you're trying to like navigate something this complex, like you don't all have to be on the same page at the exact same moment. So like my wife may have been, you know, a few chapters ahead of me in this process, you know what I mean? But when the time was right and it did come to fruition, we started talking about it. We both were just, God had worked on us at different points and got us to the same point, basically. Like, okay, look, this is something we want to pursue. And we didn't have any idea what we were doing, Stuart. Like all we knew is that we felt this call for some reason, that we felt this pull into adoption. And I mean, obviously that's been a long time ago now. And a lot of years have passed, and we've learned a lot and have grown a lot, and maybe made a lot of mistakes along the way, even through the adoption process and stuff. But that was really kind of just how God worked with us individually to get us there, to get us to the same page.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love the clear kind of emotional memory that you still have of painting the whole. It's like fantastic that you. It's the same. It's the same emotional impact that your story had on me the very first time you told me. You never forget that sort of stuff. You hold on to the stuff that shakes us emotionally, don't we?
And it was because it was risky. You know, it was risky for me to say it. And it was, you know, and my wife's response, like we didn't know how that conversation was going to go, or what the other person was going to think, or if, you know, if you've been kind of weighing something and something's been on your heart for, you know, months or years, and you're worried, like, what if my partner, what if the other person I'm trying to work with just shuts it down immediately? You know, then I'm like, well, God, what is the point of this? Like, what is going on? Luckily, we did that process individually, and once we started, we were, you know, working together hand in hand on it.
So run us through then the process from the confirmation that you had as a couple, as a married couple, to say, we want to take this forward. What were the next process? Like, how did you go about the process like that?
Yeah, so this would have been back probably like 2008, I guess, is when. So it's been a while since we started this, and a lot of it. If you've ever done anything internationally, you know, where you're getting visas, I know you have some experience with like dealing with some of this stuff too, like dealing with visas and fingerprinting, and you know, we were dealing with the United States government and dealing with the Chinese government to try to get over there to get my daughter. So it was a long process. When we first started, like I told you a minute ago, we didn't really know, like, we didn't know anything. We were very, very new in terms of like just trying to gather information about adoption. So once we started, we're like, okay, we wanted to adopt a little girl. That was our desire. And we, at first, like, you have options. You can, like, I mean, it sounds kind of weird, but you have options. Like, okay, like, you know, what kind of child do you want? You know, how old, what gender, and that kind of thing. And so we had just started off like, hey, look, let's just try to get a healthy little girl. You know, that we wanted to add another girl to our family, and that was how we started off. And then as we kind of started going into it, we started learning more and more about just what was going on across the world with the orphan crisis, with vulnerable kids, and specifically in China. And so we just started saying, like, man, maybe we should open ourselves up to, you know, some special needs and being a little more open. And so that's actually sped the process up because we were more open to more kids. But it still was about like, it was like a 2+ year process, and lots of paperwork, lots of repeated government office buildings, and, you know, just it was not an easy process to go through. I've tried to like actually memory hole a lot of it. Because it was a pain. It was a real pain.
I share that feeling with the visa process. When did China come into it, Rush?
In terms of when did we decide that we wanted to pursue
because
China?
a lot of people you've got to a place now where you've made this big decision to say, let's adopt. Why internet? Why make it more complicated for yourselves?
Right. Yeah. And I think I go back to that relationship my wife had. I think that just for some reason that sparked something else, that they had gone through that. And I had told my wife when I first brought it up, I just, in my mind, when I envisioned my daughter, she was Chinese. And I think, you know, as we've worked through this over the past, you know, 10, 12 years, we've been doing this. You know, we've learned so many different avenues, whether it be international, domestic, you know, working in the American foster care system. There's so many avenues to get access to, like, try to serve families, children that are in need. But at the time that we first stepped into it, that was also a time when international adoption was pretty popular, and it was a little bit, there was more of it happening across the globe. Those numbers have kind of dipped over the past decade as things have become a little more difficult. It's become more difficult to do it, actually, in a lot of ways. But at the time, it wasn't, we didn't like debate between 25 different countries or you know, all these different options. We really felt from the get-go that we had a heart to go to China, and that's where we really believed our daughter was there, and that was our focus really from the start.
Yes, yeah. And so, did you get linked in with places there to go, or did you go
Yeah.
and then get linked in with places?
So yeah, we the way it worked, basically we found like an agency that would kind of be like our guide through this whole process. So, you know, you link up with, there's multiple adoption agencies here in the States that you can connect with that that really help you navigate the process, because it's not just like, you know, we were laughing. There was an old sitcom on TV here, my wife and I were watching the other day. And it was like they decided to adopt from China, and they literally did the whole process like in 2 days. Like they made the decision, they got a kid, and they went and got, you know, and it's not like that at all, obviously. So you need somebody, you need professionals to kind of like help you navigate the steps to make sure you're crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's, that you're getting everything in order, because you're not just like showing up to like pick a kid. I mean, this child is becoming a part of your family, and they're becoming, in this case, they were becoming she was going to become an American citizen. So there's a lot of steps you have to go through, and you know, so you pick that agency, and they kind of start you on the process. You start filling out paperwork real quick, and start you know, having social workers come to your house to interview your spouse, to make sure that your home is appropriate and that you're an appropriate couple or person to, you know, to bring another child in to the house.
Wow. And was it an expensive process as well? Gosh.
Yeah, I mean,
for people, won't it?
Yeah, it is, and it just depends again on where you go. So you know, if you're adopting from different countries, or it costs different, you know, different governments charge different fees for different processes and visas and all that kind of thing. But obviously that just depends on if you're pursuing international adoption. You know, if you're doing a domestic adoption through the foster care system here in the United States, it doesn't really cost you anything other than time and things like that. But there's no huge fees associated with it or anything like that. So it just depends on what avenue you go. But international adoption, I mean, just travel alone. You know, I mean, from Virginia, from Virginia to China. And when we were in China, we were there for close to 3 weeks. So, you know, I mean, you go anywhere for 3 weeks and get 3 weeks of hotels and food and the travel alone costs some money. But, you know, we knew going in, like, we're not a super wealthy family. I mean, that's not like, it was one of the things that really helped us. The cost of the process and the hoops that we had to jump through really kind of helped rein us in on terms of that consumerism I was talking about. Like, we still love nice things, but like we were just, it forced us to say, hey, do we really need to buy this, or do we really need to do this? I mean, we started selling things that we had to raise money to try to go get our daughter. We became really focused on getting to her. And so it for a very middle income family, in an odd way, like the money thing really never was a problem for us. We never freaked out about it. Like, I mean, we knew we had to be, you know, aggressive in terms of being, you know, how we were going to try to raise money or try to save money. But we were so focused on getting those kids, man, that, you know, I think God just helped kind of, he met needs, you know, like he just met needs along the way. Because I think we were being faithful to what we were called to do.
Yeah, absolutely. From a financial sense, 3 weeks is a long time, but getting to know a child that you're going to have as your own, isn't a long time. Do you know what child is that process set up to a point where you know exactly the child you're coming away with when you go, or have you got those 3 weeks to decide that?
Yeah, no. So before we ever left, and I mean, we haven't got to this point, but we have adopted again since then. But before we ever left for either one of our trips, you know, we were matched with a child, and so your agency is kind of working through that and helping, trying to find a child that is eligible to be adopted and that can match with what your needs were. So before we ever left, you get matched. So we got an email with a picture of my daughter. And basically from the agent, you know, basically saying like, hey, you know, this is little girl and she's eligible to be adopted, and are you guys interested in pursuing her? And so, so we said yes. And that, you know, the problem is, again, it's not like you don't get matched and then like go get on the plane the next day. Like they're still waiting. There's still months of like process to go through. So that's tough. But so, yeah, before we ever left, we knew, but you're right. I mean, 3 weeks is not a long time to interact with a little girl. She, you know, both of our kids that we adopted were almost 2 years old when we got them. You know, you're talking about different culture, different language, you know, we were very likely some of the only white people they had ever seen in their lives. So, you know, we look different. We talk, we speak a language they don't speak. You know, they were really removing them from everything they knew. You know, I mean, people would say to us like, "Oh my gosh, it's so great! Like you're getting your daughter out of that orphanage." And yeah, I mean, of course, like I'm glad that she wasn't going to be living in an orphanage anymore. But that was her home. You know, like that was what she knew. And then we go think about like in Bolivia, those kids that we would work with who were living on the streets and stuff. And like, you know, a lot of times it was still hard to convince them to come off the street, right? Because that was what they knew. That was their home. And so, it was tough. I mean, it was tough on us, tough on her to you know, 3 weeks with us. And it wasn't even really 3 full weeks. It takes a while once you get there to kind of get to the point where you actually meet your kid and bring them home. But it's a challenge.
Yeah, I want to come back to that actually, the kind of the cultural. But you did it again, Rush. You did it again. You and Jennifer, which is flipping fantastic. You went through it. You went through it as difficult as it would have. I'm sure there were difficult aspects, especially the process, the forms, everything that. And then not long after that. So did you like immediately start the process again? Run us through. You're at home. Run us through that.
Yeah. So some of it's a little bit of a blur because I'm getting older and I can't remember all the specific timeline, but I can give you like a ballpark idea. So like, I've already said this before, but we didn't know anything about, like, we were just so young and naive. And while we knew that our daughter, you know, it wasn't going to be like a Disney movie, like, you know, we didn't show up and everything was just, you know, perfect and no issues. I don't think we were prepared for just how difficult. We thought the paperwork and the process was difficult. Yeah. In comparison, that was really the easy part because there wasn't, you know, now we have a little human being that has gone through some really traumatic experiences and is being taken from to a different culture. So, I mean, we struggled for a while. So at the time when we came home from China, I don't think my wife or I ever would have thought we would have adopted again. Like, I think we just thought that, hey, you know, we did this and we're going to focus on this little girl and our family. And, gosh, Stuart, I don't know what caused us to say like, hey, let's do this again. But I think a big part of it was, man, once you've seen and have learned about what's going on in the world, it's really hard to ignore it. Right. And so I think, when it came to making the decision to adopt again, that same dining room that we were painting when we talked about starting this process, my wife and I and my, at that time now 3 kids are sitting out there. And I told my wife, I was like, I feel like if we just stop right now, we're going to always wonder why we didn't fill that empty chair. You know? Wow. We have an extra seat at this table and we have an extra seat in the van. And if we don't pursue this, I feel like we're going to constantly look back and go, we could have expanded our family more. We could have filled those seats and provided a family to a kid in need. And so, I mean, we kind of even we look back on it now and laugh and be like, oh my gosh, what were we thinking? Like, you know, to start this all over again. But it really wasn't that much of a time difference. I mean, from the time we got my daughter to the time we went back to China and got my son was only a couple of years time. Now, luckily this time, second go around, we had already been through the process. So we knew a lot of the steps. It was like secondhand. Our agency was great to work with and help us, you know, navigate some things a little more quickly than if we were been the first time around. But yeah, I mean, it's just, it is kind of funny when we look back at it now, but now I can't imagine not doing it. You know, I mean, we were right. Like, I couldn't imagine if my son wasn't sitting at that table with me now. You know, we would have missed out on so much of life. If we had just stopped and said, hey, look, we did our good deed. We're done. You know, we had an opportunity and we were able to make it happen. So we just felt that it was the right thing to do. And, you know, thank God we did it.
That's amazing, mate. That's absolutely fantastic. Really encouraging, really challenging to hear that. Let's talk about the and obviously you lead as far as you want to go, but we're talking cultural differences on arrival. What was different in getting used to life in America? Did that look completely different between the two? And it's difficult when there's a troubled background, I guess, and somebody adopts even from the same country. So I can't imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Run us through some of the difficulties that you found with all those factors.
So, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, whenever you're crossing cultures, and that can be, you know, internationally, like from America to China, or that can be, I mean, you look at just even cultures within your own country. I mean, it's just, there's complexities to that. And the truth of it is, like, I think when we started out, we weren't quite aware of some of just how complex some of that would be. The truth of it is that, like, you know, my two of my kids they're fully American, but they're fully Chinese. And so it's difficult in some ways to for me to relate to some of the experiences they've had already in America. I mean, sad to say, even in their little elementary schools, comments that have been made. And so it's they've had to kind of learn to navigate the fact that they have some differences. And so that was difficult. But we've really tried our best to honor their birthplace and honor the aspects of Chinese culture without going overboard. Like, we haven't turned our house into complete, you know, shrines to China, but we really do. Like, we try to celebrate Chinese New Year. We try to do things to honor that country because despite whatever issues that country has, and clearly politically, government-wise, there's a lot of problems there. But it's a beautiful people. It's a beautiful country, and you know, we're so thankful for that country because two of my kids are from there. But that's challenging. So the cultural part can be challenging, and the other thing that I really do think that we just have learned so much about is just the difficulties of any human being who experiences a traumatic event, traumatic background, traumatic upbringing, experiences in life. You know, I think that a lot of people would say things to us like, man, your kids are so lucky now. They've got everything they need. They're, you know, they should be great. But you don't ever you don't just like snap a finger and that trauma's gone. You know what I mean? Like, those experiences that you have gone through as a child, and those things are the things that you didn't get to experience. I mean, just you know, I mean, since our adoptions, we've also my wife had another baby, and like when he's now almost 3, but you know, when he was born, I mean, he was immediately touched by his mom and dad. Like, he's immediately enveloped in touch and comforting words and kindness and compassion. And so that's not something that you can just say, hey, well, look, now, hey, lucky you guys, now you're in America. There's so much to unpack, and so much. I mean, to always be reminded that adoption always comes from a place of loss at the beginning. And so we're not saviors. You know, we're not going in to like save kids' lives and give them a great life. I mean, we obviously want to love these kids and do everything we can to serve them and make them a part of our family. But at the same time, like, it's super important for us to remember that, like, brokenness is what caused this. This initial, what has allowed these children into our family comes from a place of brokenness. And that's not something that you can just buy them toys or take them on vacations and fix, right? I mean, there's a long-term process that you've got to be willing to say, like, you know, we're in this with these kids for the long haul, and every kid's different, you know? Even my 2 kids have different, they're processing this whole thing differently. You have to be prepared, if you're going to step into this, to understand there's so much beauty in adoption. so much. It's just a beautiful picture of the gospel, what God's done for us, all that. It's unbelievable. But there's a whole lot of brokenness as well. And you've got to be able to watch those two things become intertwined together and see the whole picture, because you can really get discouraged by, my kids' stories are their own stories. So I don't go into all the specifics of what each one of them has gone through, but I can just tell you that for some, that there's been some really difficult days and nights and weeks and years of them processing what this means as they grow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you just started to touch on kind of the gospel meaning for us from that, and the gospel challenge that we have to take forward into our everyday. Let's look at it first from a non-Christian's perspective, because I hope and I expect that there'll be non-Christians that are listening to this. Where's their kind of place in this? Why is it important that we engage with this idea of everything that the ministry that you've set up stands for? Why would you advise somebody, it would take the gospel out of it? If someone, it doesn't mean anything to them, why should it still be important to them as an individual or a family?
Yeah, I think, Stuart, that, obviously in our experience, our relationship with God and the gospel is a huge part of it, but really, man, it's about humanity. It's about serving other people. And while I think obviously there's a lot of Christian principles in serving other humans and reaching out to those who are vulnerable, taking care of those that are oppressed, fighting for justice, like those things are, they're all through the biblical text, right?
Yeah.
But it's also, I think that's just a part of us, of humanity, of reaching out to our neighbor, reaching out to our fellow man, and that neighbor may be right next door, it may be across the globe, whatever. I don't think this is, I would never tell someone like, well, you're not a devout Christian, so you should never adopt. You should no, not at all, man. If you've got a heart for these kids, if you've got the ability to open your own life up to some messy things, but some beautiful things, then this is for you. If you've got that ability to do that, then you should go for this. If you've thought through it and have processed it, and I think it's something that all of us can do better across the globe, man, about just taking care of each other and trying to think about ways that we can put others before ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think there's a certain element of, we know what a warm house feels like. We know what comfort of family looks like. I don't think you need to be a Christian at all to know that the foundations in which we even make these decisions come from a place of we had. And so not having that, I can't imagine what that would be like. But it takes powerful individuals just to come in and change that, to be able to open their door and be able to give back, to be able to support and give to those people that wouldn't have had that, in order to even bring them to the stage we're at, where we can make that decision. That is something that we totally take for granted, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So talking about it from a gospel perspective, which I find that previous question difficult, because it's like everything now is like everything we do, the foundation we live our lives off is because of what God has done for us in sending his son to die on the cross for us, and the sacrifice that was made on our behalf. And also that calling that it has for us to go forward and love people in our day-to-day now. So there's going to be potentially people that are listening to this that are going to be Christians. They're going to be exploring the idea. Why, from a Christian perspective, theologically, do you think that we have kind of a mandate to be able to, I know we've covered a little bit already in what you mentioned, but do you think there's anything else to add into that?
Well, I think, if you've, Scripture is really clear about, what true religion and true faith is. And it's serving and reaching those who are in need. And if you look to Jesus' brother James when he talks about the widow and the orphan as a display of true religion. I mean, but there's text all through there, and the whole concept. There's so much if you take a step back and just look at the gospel in general, and you look at the parallels between us and vulnerable children, and how we're broken. We're without an eternal home, an eternal father, and we live in this world that's difficult and challenging, and this loving God, this loving Father, comes down and adopts us and weaves us into his family. And we certainly, the only thing that I always try to say is say, like, I'm not trying to say that we're becoming Jesus. We're not becoming saviors to these kids. We're trying to imitate what has been done for us. And so everything that we do, it's coming from that place of like, man, we're broken, we're lost, we're without family, but God has found us. God has mended that brokenness. God has given us a family. And so if we can just like be a picture of that, if we can just in a small way be a demonstration of that love that God has for us here on earth, and if I can make my home just a little bit more like heaven, then that's it. That's the goal, and so it's all about, of reminding ourselves that we aren't the savior, that God, he's the savior, but like he's called us into this. And you can't spend much time in scripture unless you really are like hopping around and trying to avoid the clear calls that God has placed on his church to reach the oppressed, to reach the vulnerable, to reach children, to fight for justice. I mean, just the constant cries for righteousness and justice in the Bible make it really clear that this isn't, whether you decide to adopt or not, that there, not everyone is supposed to go adopt kids based off listening to this conversation, right? But the call to care and support and find ways to serve vulnerable, lost people, it's just so crystal clear. We've all have a role to play in that.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. We hope we're really answering some questions that people have. They're listening to this that maybe are along that process. How real is this issue, Rush? You mentioned earlier that as you started to delve into it as a subject, as a real idea, you realized the pure significance of this and the real issue. I don't know if I'm looking for statistics when I ask this question. I don't know but you may have. How real is this issue?
Well, the numbers, a lot of it depends. I mean, if you talk about like the global orphan crisis and the number of kids that were without parents, I mean, there's so many different, you could probably Google it and probably find like a bunch of different numbers, because how people define what an orphan is. If it's somebody with only one parent, or somebody with children with no parents. So the one thing I would always say about the numbers side of it is like, you can actually overwhelm people with the statistics because it is a vast problem, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of kids that are in need, and it's not just like internationally through international opportunity. I mean, just in our own communities, whether here or where you are. I mean, there's kids that are in difficult and vulnerable situations. So what I always tell people to be careful about getting too concerned about the large scope. Because what I can tell you, and I didn't always used to do this. I used to be like a little more aggressive about telling people, do you know the number of children that are, that are orphaned across, and what it can be so overwhelming that people feel like, well, what am I supposed to do? You know what I mean? How am I supposed to solve this massive problem? And so I think breaking it down into saying, like, we have really focused here, like in our community here at our church, of like, how many kids in our county that my church is in, how many kids here are in need of foster parents? here. And so like, instead of telling people there are X number of millions of children across the globe, we can say, hey, right now, there are 134 kids in our county that are in need of foster families, in need of temporary housing to like get them through this difficult stage they're in. And so when you tell someone, hey, there's millions of kids versus 134 kids or whatever the number might be right this exact moment, it's a much more solvable problem, or much more, it's easy for people to like on ramp into it without being overwhelmed. But it is, I mean, I say that not to minimize the seriousness of the problem. I mean, I can tell you, I mean, from when I was in China, we had the opportunity, I'll just tell you a little story that kind of just talks about just the scope of it. When we went to adopt my son back in 2012, we got to go visit the orphanage in which he was living at the time, which is, that's not, you don't always get to do that. We didn't get to do that with my daughter, but we got to do that with my son. And, you know, man, I mean, I don't know how to, there was just, it was a mass of humanity in this orphanage. And, you know, they showed us the crib that my son had been living in. And I mean, Stuart, you know, it was just a gigantic room full of babies. I mean, not I say babies, some of them were older, you know, I mean, it was overwhelming. So like, we, at that moment, my wife and I came home from that trip, man, and we were just like, what is going on? Like, we got to do something beyond this. Like, I mean, at some point we do start running out of room at our table, but what else can we do to like raise awareness about how, you know, this really is a big problem. It's massive. And while we were so thrilled to like, I was holding my son in the middle of this orphanage and we were taking him home and he was having a family, man, it hit us hard. Like, oh my gosh, like, what are we going to do about the rest of these kids? So it is a massive problem. You know, hurting and vulnerable kids is a big issue across the globe. But if you find in your local community, even, there's ways you can get engaged or find places to serve kids in your local community. It doesn't have to be like, you know, you start some massive organization. You know, you can make an impact day to day in kids' lives.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. I'm trying to think of questions that people may have. The one question that I think may have is how, when you've got 2 kids already, you know what I'm about to ask you, don't you?
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yep.
How does that then, how does a child from a different country fit in, an adopted child fit into a family that's already assembled, both in acceptance and any other things you came up against?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's tough, man. I mean, it's interesting to me because I think like at this point, you know, like I said, we went and adopted my daughter in 2010 and then went back in 2012 and got my son. So obviously, you know, a good bit of time has passed from both those adoptions. But it didn't take long for me to kind of like forget that they were Chinese, like, because they were just my kid, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like you just kind of like, you get in the routine, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But there's certain, I mean, it's still challenging, I think, for them and for other people, because we can't hide the fact when our family goes somewhere, like we get questions, right? Cause like, hold on, why is there like this mixed bag of people, you know, that not everybody looks the same. So like those things can be challenging. And it can be challenging when you already have like a family that's kind of functioning in a certain way, right? So I mean, when we brought my daughter home, we had 2 kids and we had rules, and my wife and I foolishly thought that we had like figured parenting out, you know, like we thought we were good to go, man. You know, we'll bring this little girl home, and you know, we're the people who were having problems. They were just not good parents, right? We were great parents, and we that wasn't the case. We learned real quickly that, you know, every kid is different, and you have to parent and figure out ways to integrate them into the family in every way. We've really tried to make our kids, no matter whether they, you know, were born here or adopted, that they're, you know, I don't have any of my own kids, you know, if you know what I mean. All my kids are my own.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, I get, you know, and that's a super common question. Like, it's just normal. Like, you know what? And I mean, it's a question I would have asked a million times to other people, but you know, the whole idea is that I am fully their father and they are fully my kid. Now, I also honor the fact that They did and do have other family somewhere across the globe, right?
Yeah.
But these kids are fully mine and
Yeah.
fully and fully my own. And so while it's not without its challenges, and I think even for them, the complexities of trying to figure out how to fit into a different culture, and because the truth is, man, like, trying to think how to say this, and they are fully American and fully Chinese, but really, it's easy for them to feel like they're neither.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if they were to go back to China today, they wouldn't
belong there either.
Fit, right?
Yeah.
And they when they're here, it's still, I think, a challenge for them. Like, no matter how great things are, they still hear comments, they still hear people say things, they still have people say disparaging things. I mean, there's this sense of like, of if they're in this case of limbo, and that's a really tough thing to deal with. But we've tried to integrate them into the family as much as we can, still honoring their culture, their past.
Yeah.
And that's what I would suggest to people, is you just try to figure out ways to honor their birth parents, it's very easy to demonize people who give their kids up.
Yeah.
And to say like, oh my gosh, what kind of people would do this? But man, I mean, first off, they chose life. I mean, they're here. They made decisions that I can't imagine what they were going through. And we see this, and I can just speak for just whether it's adoption internationally or even in the foster care system here in the States, like, just people are in really difficult spots, man. And they have to make really hard decisions. And it's easy to judge or put yourself in a position of thinking that, you would never do what X person did. So we try to do the best we can to honor those birth families as well, and just be and say thank you to them. I mean, I'm grateful. I'm so thankful that they chose to have these kids, and that we've been given this gift from those families. I'm forever grateful to their birth families.
Yeah, that's beautiful, mate. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I've got, I know that there's people that will listen to this that are considering adoption. What would you say to those, as we all do, that doubt ourselves and our ability to be good people? For those that are parents or thinking about having kids at all, doubt their ability as parents through the adoption process. How does that? Did you go through that, and what would you advise to somebody else?
Yeah, I think this is true no matter what for parenting in general, brother. I mean, it's, one of the things that I tell people a lot when I have conversations about adoption or foster care or any of these things, working with the ministry at our church, is we are not heroes. Like, my wife and I are, we are just totally normal, screwed up parents making mistakes, yelling at our kids, losing our temper, all those things. We're just normal people. And you can almost like freeze yourself out from having a family, from taking a risk to step into adoption or foster care, or because you're like, I've got to get myself perfect before I can start this next step of life. And we do that with the, people like, until I get my life straight, I can't really worry about getting into a church or working, build a relationship with Jesus. And that's like totally not the way God is. It's the opposite. We come broken. And so I think, I would always say to anybody who's stepping into parenthood and they're going to try to plan to have a family, whether that be through adoption, through foster care, through, by having biological kids, whatever the case is, clearly you've got to think through it, process it, and make sure you're in the right position for you and your partner to like make that happen. But you just have to trust that God he's going to give you the grace and the skill sets that you need to navigate that situation. So while you shouldn't rush in, especially I do say, I mean, we're talking about trauma and the experiences of working with vulnerable kids, man, you've got to be prepared. Like, you should be prepared for what that it might entail.
Yeah.
But man, I think we got 5 kids now. And if you would have told, 22-year-old me I would have 5 kids, I'd be like, there's no way I could do it. I mean, after we had 3 kids, I would have been like, there's no way we can do 4. And then after 4, I was like, there's no way we're doing 5, you know? I still say we're not doing 6, but I mean, like, you know, it's just, yeah, you know, you know, there's just the way, you know, doors open, you know, you develop, you know, different skill sets and time management and relationships with other people that help you out along the way. So, you know, I think it's not something you should rush into without really giving it thought. If you are a person of faith, you know, praying about it, speaking to, you know, counselors and things like that, it's super important. But don't be so afraid of taking steps that may seem a little risky. If you're educated about, if you educated yourself, you've prepared yourself, you've had those tough conversations with your partner, and then you know, I think, you know, you should be willing to take that leap of faith, to take that risk of, like, you know, maybe we can open ourselves up to something that maybe we think that we're not fully prepared for, or, you know, we got to wait till we pay off our house or pay off our flat or whatever. You know, we got to have our cars paid off. We got to have our student loans gone. Before we can do anything. And you can end up going through life, man, and
not doing anything,
and miss out. Yeah. I mean, I think about if we had missed out on these kids, man, I don't know. I'm sure we would have, you know, I guess our life would have been fine without them, but man, I would have missed so much joy, a lot of difficulty and sleepless nights at times, but so much of a gift these kids are, man.
Yeah. So Rush, you've got 5 kids. You're married,
yes.
happily married. You are a big member of the church. And you also talk about your job, Rush, just for a second.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't just raise kids for a living. That's not my job. So I'm a police detective here in Virginia. So I've been doing that for 19 years now. I've been with the police department. So yeah, I have a kind of a unique job. I work night shifts, so I'm you know, sleep a little bit during the day when I can, and when there's not a lot of noise, which isn't that often. So yeah, that's what I do for a living. And then you know, in the rest of the time, I'm raising babies or trying to get other people to do it.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing to think you've got 5 kids. You do an important and amazing job as well, which we could have had a podcast on. We probably would. And we'll probably invite you back to talk about that, if that's okay with you, because that's a topic in itself, isn't it? Policing in the States.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
But I mean, we've managed to do just over an hour. But all of this has you know, I said a big part of your church. You've managed to set up then off the back of this and seeing all of this Intertwined Family.
Right. Yeah.
Talk about that. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So yeah, that really came from after our second adoption. When I told you, you know, we left China and we just came back with this sense of like, oh my gosh, we've got to do something, right? Like how can we get people to listen to this, like this, we just felt this burning desire of like just screaming about it to everybody. Like, look, church, we got to do stuff. And so this was really birthed out of after we came home. I was in church and we were singing a worship song of some sort, and it was referencing orphans and I just, man, I was like, we got to stop singing about this. We got to start doing something, right? Yeah. And I mean, it was like one of those moments where I just felt so convicted of like, I don't want to hear another song about adoption or orphans or anything like that in this church until we start doing stuff. And again, it wasn't like the church was against it. It just wasn't, we didn't talk about it.
Yes,
and so I reached out to our senior pastor, who I've known forever, and that's those conversations started, and then we eventually got to this point where we have this ministry called Intertwined Family, and it really is about the idea of the brokenness and the beauty of these children's experiences in their lives, and watching those become intertwined into our family and into our church. And when we do that, when we honor the brokenness and the beauty of it, and we watch those things get intertwined, then God gets the glory, and he's glorified by what we're able to do. And so that ministry is really all about education and trying to get the church to be aware, and not just we work with our local government. We do it's not just working in the church environment, but it's trying to educate people about the need and what ways they can step into it. It's about supporting families that are in this space who are fostering or adopting, and then also just about advocating for kids. I mean, there's it's not just like becoming a foster parent or an adoptive parent that we can work with kids and serve kids. I mean, some kids aren't eligible to be adopted or to enter into foster care. You know, we work with older kids that have aged out. I mean, so there's just so many ways that we can get involved. And so we just wanted to have a place where people in our church or even in our community out, you know, even if they don't go to our church, like could have a place to come to like have resources, to connect with people, to maybe get training, to come for support, just to trying to make it so like, talking about adoption, talking about foster care is not something that's foreign in our church. Yeah. You know, we want it to be something that people aren't like, kind of like, we know there's adoptive kids. We know some, we want it to be just this, hey man, this is just what we do. We are following God's mandate here to serve others and to work with vulnerable people. And we want it to be normal. And I think that's really the biggest success of this ministry. If you were to ask what's the biggest thing we've been able to do, it's to make the general church population that we're with every Sunday to just be like, oh, it's not a taboo topic. We can just talk about foster care. We can talk about adoption openly. We can ask questions and not be afraid that we're going to say something offensive and be shut down. You know, like we can have real conversations. And I think that's really been the biggest benefit of what we've done. And so, you know, I mean, I still claim that it's kind of in its infancy stages of like trying to figure out, like we're still learning how to navigate this and how to better serve families and kids. But we just want to be a resource for people in Richmond, Virginia, and find ways that we can serve these kids that are even right here in our own neighborhoods, man.
It's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. You touched on something at the start of that, which, you know, you said it wasn't as if the church were like ignorant to this going on. But it just needed you. And like, I like to just take that opportunity to anybody listening, and I'm sure you'll back me up here, is that actually the church isn't about leaders that step up and tell us what we're going to do. It's about being responsive to the call that we feel. Like we've heard Rush talk about today, this idea of actually as a couple, they were both individually spoken to, that they both came together and as a result have been obedient to the call that they feel that God's put on their heart. And so as a result, they've gone to the pastor of their church and be able to set something up, which means that process can multiply. You know, that actually more people can get involved in this at whatever stage they're at and be able to do something about it. I think we can be so easy to just look at churches and say, well, they're not doing enough, when really, you know, the church should be challenging. The church isn't just the building with a person on the stage. It's about its members, and it's about them engaging with what God's speaking directly into their heart and changing something about that. Did you feel like, I mean, you've obviously been a huge part of the church for a long time. Did you feel like that was an easy process? Did they just say, you take the reins, or how did they lead that?
Yeah, I mean, so it was I think it's always, your point is so dead on, because churches, I don't care how small they are, how big they are, they just get inundated with people telling them, you need to do X. You know what I mean? Like you should have a ministry for A, B, C, D, and go right down the list, have a million things, but then just walk away, right? You know what I mean? Like you should be doing that, church pastor. And so I think while there was still like some hoops and some challenges, it took a while to kind of get some momentum going. I think they were very, very happy that it wasn't like, you know, I didn't go to them and say, hey, I need you to run this ministry. I said, look, I'll do it. I'll do it. I just need like the blessing and the support. And so we're at a point now where we've made a lot of progress in that regard. I mean, you know, whenever you're starting something new, and especially at a church that's been around for a little while, I mean, it takes a little while to kind of get those processes rolling and become more recognized and things like that. But you know, we're at a point now where, you know, we've got, you know, full support from the pastors, and, you know, I mean, I've got a very well-known guest speaker from the United States that's coming to our church to preach in November. So like they've been very open to giving us a lot of freedom and a lot of ability to spread this message. So, you know, but the key is, man, even if you're in a place, you know, if you're in a church and you wanted to start something or do something, even if you don't get great support at first from pastors or staff or whatever, because they're just so overwhelmed, or, you know, that doesn't mean you can't do the work, right? I mean, you can still get out there and still do stuff and still find ways to work with kids and serve kids, even without, you know, an officially blessed, you know, entity that you've created in your own church. You know, be patient with that, because I mean, I know that at first when I started, man, I was just like, I was so fired up. I'm like, what is taking so long? How come people aren't coming along on this? You know, why do I have to, you know, why can't I just do X, Y, and Z? But, you know, I think, you know, God was really just teaching me some patience there. Like, man, look, you better, you know, you're not in control of this. It's going to happen. And, you know, just be aware that, like, you know, if you step up, and the point that you made is so dead on, man, is that we can't just sit and wait or demand for staff and leadership to just do all the things, right? I mean, if you have a call for anything, you know, let's, you know, step up and, you know, and act and take action. You know, actions are so much more valuable than our words. And so it's easy to, you know, make a post on social media about how outraged you are about an issue.
Yeah.
You know, it's a whole different ball game to step up and say, hey, look, what am I going to do about this issue? So yeah, man, don't be afraid to take those steps, to take action, even if you don't get the support that you feel like you should, or that you want.
Wow. That's fantastic. What a place. I think that's a suitable place to bring this into land. Rush, thank you so much for sharing this. You've really touched my heart. I hope you've touched the hearts of, and I'm sure, you know, I'm not even sure. I know you will have touched the hearts of those people that will get a chance to listen to this. It's a fantastic blessing, and it's such an eye opener, because, you know, my wife and I, Nanny and I, we watched the film on Netflix at the moment, Instant Family. Have you watched it, Rush?
Yeah. Yep. Yes, I have. Yeah, it's good.
Is it really old? I mean, I watched it a couple of months ago, but
no, it's maybe a couple of years, but it's a great film, and it does a good job of touching on some real issues.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But we rely on those things where it's like, coming into our home and me binging on Netflix to get our eyes open to what's around. And you are right. We need to be open to having those sorts of conversations and plugging into a podcast and just listening in and broadening our horizons. And I think you've done a great job of doing that. Thank you for talking about what you've spoken about so clearly today. You've really blessed this, and you're actually our first podcast guest. So I don't think you've done really well. As I say, like, I hope that just backs up for you how important it was for me to go, right, who lives like that? Who lives as an example of their faith on a day-to-day basis? I know somebody for the job. So I'm really,
man, I love it, man. I love what you're doing here, and I think it's great. Again, that means the world to me, brother. I've told you before. I'll tell the whole podcast world here, man. I mean, you're a special guy, and you know, that connection that we made over there in Bolivia. I mean, who would have thought this? You know, this police officer from the States and this guy from across the pond would like make this connection. But I mean, I love knowing you, and you know, I wish we were a little bit closer. You know, but it's a little bit of a challenge to grab a cup of coffee or tea, I guess. But I love what you're doing, and I'm very honored to have been able to be on here with you. And I'm always happy to do anything for you, your family, and happy to come back whenever, man.
Absolutely. Bless you, mate. Well, as you're the first guest, you actually hold the baton we're going to carry forward. What we're going to do on this podcast when we have a guest is ask them if there's someone in their life that has inspired them, or is a good example of someone they think what story would be able to inspire people or be able to change the life of one person or whoever's watching at the time. So Rush, I'd like to just ask you, is there somebody that you feel is a good, that really encapsulates what we're trying to do here on the pod?
Yeah, I just, it's kind of hard to think. There's so many different people in my life that I could probably try to throw out there, but somebody, a couple that I haven't known that long really. But I got to know them through working in this space. There's a couple here in Richmond that started an organization called For Richmond, FOR Richmond. And it's Matt and Anna Shank. And they this organization is all about trying to equip church leaders, whether they're pastors or lay leaders, to collaborate together across denominational lines. So it's not like, hey, we're trying to get, the Anglican church to do this, the Catholics to do this. It's none of that. It's coming across denominational lines to find ways to unite as churches, to attack and tackle issues that are bigger than one church can handle. So whether that be, education in the school systems here in Richmond, the reason I got to know them is they were working in the foster care system with us, like partnering with organizations, working with poverty, with food insecurity. Yeah. So it's a really cool organization because they aren't like, they're not really just like, hey, we're going to do this. They're like, let's get the body of believers from all denominations together and let's change this city and make in Richmond, make Richmond a little bit more of like what our goal is for the rest of the globe. And so it's a pretty cool organization.
Brilliant.
Great people.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I'll have to reach out to them and see if we can get them on at some stage. That would be brilliant to cross those boundaries, because we can easily be in boxes, can't we, in our own space and not crossing, and very limited in crossing over. So I'll reach out to them and see if that's something we can sort out. That'd be brilliant, Rush. Well, look, let me just thank you again. It's fantastic to have you on. Fantastic just to have an opportunity to reconnect with you, and I hope to be able to speak to you again soon, my friend.
Yeah, man. I look forward to seeing you again in person soon. And I hope. But yeah, love what you're doing here, brother. You guys take care.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. That's very good of you. Bless you, mate. Yeah, guys, if you liked what you saw today, if you'd like to just subscribe on all platforms that are available to do that, the 5-star rating mark is on most podcast platforms. That really helps us get the podcast out to other people, and also just subscribing on YouTube and all the platforms that you've seen. So thank you so much to Rush. He was fantastic, and I hope you've been really touched by his message today. Bless you guys. Take care. Bye-bye.